It's Song Talk Radio with Michael, Neil, Phil, and the gang.
Welcome to Song Talk Radio. This is the show with songwriters talking to other songwriters about the craft of songwriting. We share tips, tools, and techniques, and together we all become better at writing songs. I'm your host, Neil Modi, and with me are the agricultural members of the Song Talk Radio Action Team. We have Fertilizer Phil.
Well, that covers a lot of stuff, I suppose. But
It's a lot of stuff.
it's a little bit healthy, and we'll have a discussion about that after the
Very,
show.
very good for everything.
That is true. That is true, I suppose.
Best stuff ever.
Including bombings.
And we have Micronutrient Mike.
Oh, well, that's nice. I thought I was going to get like mulch or something, so I appreciate
Mulch would
that.
work.
I would
feel
rather
much
have
healthier
mulch.
now.
Mulch doesn't have
Well.
alliteration with Phil. Sorry, Phil. So please send your comments and questions to @SongTalk Radio on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram, or feedback at songtalk.ca for the good old-fashioned email, and we'll share your thoughts on the show. And please visit us at songtalk.ca to find out how you can be a guest. And before we get to our guest tonight, Mike, you sent us a really interesting email over the weekend about the Lima Global Tuning System. Can you tell us
Yes, I
what
did.
that was?
Yeah, I was reading this Pitchfork article, and this person had spent a long time, I can't remember how many years, so close, probably over 10, developing a recording software that didn't conform to Western scale of majors and minors, but had, what's it called, microtones or quartertones? Anyway, that could do Indian and African music and Middle Eastern music, because apparently, and I was ignorant of this, that it's difficult to do that with Logic or Ableton or Cubase or Pro Tools. So he's come up with a software, and I believe it's free. You've used it, right, Neil?
Yeah, when I got your email, I was up early on Sunday and I was like, "Oh my God, this sounds really fascinating." So I dove right into it and I started playing around with it. And there's two different programs that he has. One is like a recording software type of thing, but the one it's a web-based app called Lima that basically you hook it up to a MIDI instrument, or you can use your computer keyboard as a MIDI instrument, and you select a tuning, or you can customize your own tuning. And it's very graphical based, and you can it shows you where the typical 12-note equal temperament scale is, and you can nudge the notes any way you want in between the tones and make a scale out of that. And then the thing that I was really impressed with is that it can interface with your other MIDI systems. So I could actually pull the output from that and pull it into my Cakewalk DAW and use any virtual instrument I wanted. So
cool.
I could use strings, I could use my piano, I could use anything I wanted, which was really kind of neat and quite fascinating. And I'll be honest, my background is Indian, but my brain is very Western music driven. And I tried playing around with a Chinese scale, and it was a pentatonic, and I was like, there's only 5 notes and they sound really odd. It's just
yeah,
it's a very strange thing to go around with. And I'm still trying to wrap my head around what's the next, how do I write a song around one of these things?
Oh, but I was saying he because I couldn't remember his name offhand, but it's Kayam Alami is the guy's name.
Yeah.
And he's
What's
done
the
a lot
website?
of great work. The website, well, there is, it's Nowhere Recordings is, I think he's reached through, and I think you get the software through a record company that he and some friends have formed, or some associates.
It's a web-based software, so it literally runs in your browser. That's it. There's nothing to download.
And we will post a link to it.
We'll post a link.
In this
the other
show.
interesting thing I found about it was that when I pulled the MIDI into my DAW, I looked at the event list in the MIDI, and the way he actually did it was every note, because you're playing on a Western keyboard, right? You're playing on a keyboard controller, so it's not tuned that way. But he put little pitch modulations on each note. So it's like you're playing with the pitch bend in a very accurate way, in a very precise way to get those individual notes. It's this is genius.
Yeah, I wondered how it technically worked, and okay, that's how it does.
Yeah. It's basically like an automated pitch bend wheel.
I've often, been working on a song and would have a melody in my head, and I'd be singing it, and very often the note that I was going for seemed to be between two notes. So I'm actually kind of interested in this. Maybe I'm a microtonal guy. I just never knew it.
Yeah, quite possibly.
Some people had
And
mentioned
for you-
I did,
and
but
for you guitarists, I mean, guitarists technically can tune. You can do odd tunings that us piano players aren't really privy to.
yes. Most guitar, it's easy to have a guitar that's out of tune.
Yeah.
And then there's people who play like fretless guitars, which would be a challenge. But yeah, it's a fascinating thing. It's something I've wanted to play around with for a while.
Yeah.
Because I've often had melodies in my head which didn't seem to fit, and I just thought, oh, maybe my pitch is off, but maybe it's not.
I think we'll have to investigate this further and maybe have a whole show on it.
That's true.
Definitely worth some further examination, and we'll definitely share the link on the web post.
Very much so.
So everybody can check it out. It's really cool.
The next show we have coming up is the song or challenge again, isn't it?
I think it's two. We've someone in between there.
Okay.
We've got Jellyfish Interrupted next show, and then the one after is our second installment of our listeners respond to the SongTalk challenge, the second annual SongTalk challenge. So there's still time if you are working on a song, if it fits the requirements of the challenge, which is to write a song that has the same chord progression throughout. And you have to make it sound good or lively or at least interesting the way through by a number of other devices other than changing chords.
Yeah, don't just write a bad song.
Yeah, exactly. That's we try not to encourage that here.
That's true.
A bad song.
I do.
You can send us the second draft or the third draft.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting to see the process for sure, but we would prefer that hopefully you'd end up somewhere that you're happy.
Yeah. For sure. Okay.
Very much.
Any other items for discussion, guys?
No,
I
I
think
think
not.
that is it.
All righty.
All
So
right.
our guest tonight is the Atlantic Canada roots rock band Tomato Tomato. I'm assuming that's how you say their name because it's Tomato Tomato or Tomato Tomato or Tomato Tomato or Tomato Tomato.
I thought it was tomato tomato. You see, we'll have to get to our guest quickly and get this sorted out.
Have to sort this out. But in the meantime, let's hear a little bit of their song "Better at Leaving."
All right, let's just get that happening here.
Yes. Why don't we?
Up in the air, take it or leave it. I keep telling my friends she's just in for the weekend. Come Monday morning, she'll be halfway to Cleveland. She's good at love, but she's better at leaving. She comes in on the Greyhound like original sin. Watercolor tattoos splashed on her skin. I don't ask when she's going, I don't ask her to stay.
Aha.
Welcome, John.
Hello.
Well,
So
John,
what is it? Tomato Tomato?
Tomato, tomato.
Tomato
You got
Tomato.
All right.
Which is
God
completely lost on people in England and Australia, we've realized.
There you go.
Right.
So they don't
What
know
do they say?
tomato?
Just tomato, tomato.
Tomato Tomato.
And what about in the States? Is it just tomato tomato?
No, they get it.
They get it?
Oh.
Yeah,
I thought it was the perfect kind of pan-Atlantic trap between America and Britain, the perfect name for a band in Canada.
Well, that's what I was wondering. Like, how does it fare across Canada? Like, is Ontario PC different than Atlantic Canada?
Well, you know what? I realized that in Atlantic Canada, it very easily can be tomato, tomato
Oh,
Right.
versus tomato, tomato. So really, we're looking to be a trio soon, I think. Is what's
So as soon as you
happening.
add another member.
That's right. Yeah.
right. Okay. And you're the primary songwriter of the band. That's right.
That's right. Yeah.
And how many other members of the band?
It's just my wife and I.
Okay.
Yeah. So
What
it's,
is your process to generate songs? If you're writing them, are you writing them obviously with her as you know, do you have a complete song and then you present it to her, or do you have ideas and then build them, back and forth? Or
Yeah, I used to kind of present ideas to her earlier on in the process. And then for whatever reason, I just stopped doing that and more presented her, maybe not a finished product, but something closer to a finished product. And and I definitely am writing certain songs. I'm writing with her in mind. Absolutely.
When you say that, do you mean for her vocal range, or do you mean even like lyrical content and things like that?
More lyrical content, and then I find, I'll find a key that works for her. So I usually write it in my own vocal range, just for convenience and to accommodate my terrible falsetto. And then so it's more lyrical content, which is a really kind of it's a nice perk of being in a duo where you have two singers. You can kind of play with that, and you have options. And she's really, I took up singing more recently, really just for this band. And Lisa is a trained singer and a really beautiful singer. And so sometimes when I write a pretty ballad, I know that I am not going to butcher that, and I will be happy to listen to her sing it.
Yeah. Yeah. And not only a band with two singers, but with a male singer and a female singer. So when you're talking about lyrical content, like I was wondering, I was trying to listen to your songs going, okay, is this from the guy's perspective or from the girl's perspective, depending on who's singing? Or is there any relationship between that sort of thought process behind it?
Yeah, absolutely. So that track, Better Leaving, is kind of about a woman who is in and out of a guy's life, and she's very much a free spirit, and he's very kind of stable, and she comes and goes, and kind of that dynamic is more interesting to me than if it's a woman saying, I've got this guy that I can't get to settle down. Mm-hmm. It just, because that one could have gone either way, and it just felt like, that just doesn't feel as compelling, or it's been certainly done more. So it was more inspiring me to think about like a woman who is a free spirit versus, it just takes on a whole other perspective when it's another guy who won't commit.
How tight are your how tight are the melodies? Do you have are you very specific in terms of the melodies when you present the song, or is it kind of very open? Is there a lot of movement and changing after your initial presentation?
Yeah, they definitely change, especially if it's one that's going to feature Lisa. Then she's free to do with it what she will. I think that's a very natural process for us because we're both actually originally jazz musicians. Oh. So that's really what our entire background was before like 2014 or 2013. So I play saxophone. That's what I studied in school. Oh. Definitely thinking about that during your conversation on microtonal music. Done a lot of that. Playing saxophone, some of it not as intentional, maybe, but but yeah. So that's our background. So we kind of grew up in that tradition of you'd have a standard song with a very specific melody, and then it was your job to interpret that and expand upon that. So I think we treat our own writing that way too. Just seems like a natural thing, and hopefully it's going to develop and not be just kind of a lead sheet rendition of your own song.
Mm-hmm. And what is your process? Do you start with a melody, with lyrics, with the music? Is it always the same?
Yeah, for a long time I started with the lyrics. And I think because when I started writing lyrics basically for this group, and I have a lot of experience writing instrumental music and arranging for big band and orchestra and kind of doing all that stuff. So I kind of took the music part of it for granted and was really hyper focused on just trying to figure out lyric writing and really put in a lot of time doing that. Then with this last album, I kind of just dawned on me that, I could actually start some of these musically first. So it's I got lost myself in the weeds for a little bit with the lyrics, but so this is kind of the first album where it was a little more of a blend. Like some of them I had an instrumental vibe in mind or a specific chord progression or melody. And then it was a matter of picking through lyrical ideas and finding the right match. Yeah. So this album was a little bit of both.
Do you find
And did it
that
change the songs themselves?
Yeah, that's what I
writing-
was just going to ask.
Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. They're like that track Better Leaving is not really complicated lyrically, and it's not a big long plot. I had this groove in my head, and I just wanted a song that would kind of, in a bit of an opposite way, a lyric that would be a vehicle to the groove. Which sometimes I forget that is a totally legitimate way to write. Not that I'm phoning in the lyrics, but you know.
Well, also the having a background in jazz. I mean, jazz can be so serious and so
Complex.
complex and almost unapologetic at how serious it is, and the fact that it's just a great tune or just a great groove. Sometimes that's not enough. So it's an interesting tension to have within your own work, I think.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I think, ideally, in a perfect world, it has both.
Yeah.
It have a great groove and a great lyric.
Yeah.
And
Of course, it can be challenging for experienced instrumentalists to write a song that leaves some room for a vocalist. Because you feel like oh, I got to have this great groove that's got melody and got interesting chord progressions and really inventive stuff, almost jazz, and then there's no room for the singer. Right? It's like
yeah. It's like I don't have any bars of 5/4 in here. It's barely even music. Yeah, no, that's a good point. It's funny you say that because I knew when I began writing for this group that I did not want to do that. And I went completely the other way and was really very humbled by the whole process. I mean, I think you're right in that it would have been easy to be like, folk music, it's like 4 chords in a whole tune. I play 4 chords per bar, but that's really not my perspective. So we spent just about a year or so just playing covers and just kind of going through it as if we were new to the whole thing and kind of taking that beginner's mindset. Now, we probably expedited the process a little bit and moved through it a little more quickly, but we wanted to have that experience of starting in a genre. And for me, it was starting on guitar and starting to sing. So, that was all very new and we didn't want to rush it. And we just wanted to let it kind of be an organic process and not kind of like, we're going to start this band and it's going to be this and we're going to do this because we've got 5 music degrees between us and blah, blah, blah. We really, we were not coming at it from that headspace at all.
When you're attacking covers, I mean, not just literally playing covers, you're actually, or maybe you're not, I mean, did you actually like start picking apart those cover songs and seeing what make them work and where the melodies shaped and what kind of chord progressions they were? I mean, you have to learn that stuff to do the cover anyway, but there's a difference between just sort of passively playing it and actively analyzing it.
Yeah, we definitely did that. Yeah, without a doubt. Probably more, I mean, definitely for lyrics, definitely for melody and shape of melody, but also looking at, I mean, in some ways it's easy to write a song with 4 chords. In other ways, it's very difficult. And how does that kind of harmonic motion work? And how are all these songs that are so simple, so amazing? What's really going on under the hood with that? So yeah, I can get really nerdy with it. So there's a lot of journals.
We love nerdy on the show.
Yeah, this is the show for that.
Perfect.
That's, when I was in young bands, we were kind of like punky art dicks. And, we were very proud of the fact that, we never played covers. But I think you learn a lot from playing people's covers. You learn a lot. And, if you're a songwriter and you haven't played a lot of other people's music, play people's other music, learn it really well. You'll learn so much. It's such an easy way of doing it. I think even if you're not a great musician at it, just playing those chords and learning those melodies, you'll learn so much about how a song is made.
Absolutely. And I think on another like related note to that is that the minute you stop becoming a fan of music, you might be in trouble. So even though you're creating your own content, it's still important to be a fan.
Mm-hmm.
That is very true. You have to keep on feeding your creative library, really.
Yeah.
By listening to stuff, and it's easy when you're, you just get up your own butt and you're just working on your own stuff and not paying attention to anyone else's.
Yeah,
very true. So when it came to Better at Leaving, can you talk a little bit about? You talked a little bit about where the song came from, but how much editing did you go through, or did it kind of pour out all at once?
Yeah, this one went through a few iterations. I had kind of one version, lyrics only written, didn't amount to much. I tend to just write, like when I'm writing for an album, it's kind of a year of just writing a song per week. I'm not a real fast writer, but I just keep writing constantly. So, there was close to 50 songs that I had to choose from. This was one that I had an older version of that, just something about the title stuck with me, and I kind of brought it back and played with it to make it a little more upbeat and stole some ideas from other things. So there was a lot of editing with this one. But once I knew what I wanted the groove to be, I actually wrote it on bass, which is the only song I've ever written on bass. But so that's kind of how that one came together. It was a bit of a hodgepodge, definitely not a through composed moment of inspiration at all.
Is that typical for you, or is that an anomaly?
No, some of them are more written, like we have a song Chasing Rainbows on the album, and that was more written in like a couple hours, where I just had this kind of childhood memory and I just followed that. Some of them would be more of a straight line, but written over a couple days. I kind of really like to investigate different possibilities, and even if I end up going with my original inspiration, I want to feel like it's something that's been tested and that it's the best direction for the song. So some of them are more like that. And then this is maybe the only one that's a bit of a like hodgepodge of old, ideas that I kind of brought back.
Well, it certainly seems you're not afraid to rewrite. And that's something we always harp on this show is don't be afraid to rewrite.
Oh,
yeah. I get how hard it can be to go back in sometimes, and how that can be a really intimidating process, and your lyrics can feel very precious. But I'm really big on editing. I mean, I think there's a balance there. I usually try to get the initial inspiration out in one thing.
Yes.
And knowing that I can just keep moving and write cliches and just put in filler lines, and sometimes they're just gibberish, but just to get a cohesive idea for the whole. And then I go back in and I start picking it apart and kind of creative writing exercises, visual exercises for a verse, and see what I can pull out of that to improve upon the kind of show aspects versus just the initial draft might be more oriented towards telling the story.
That's a great tip, actually.
Yeah. That's
why don't we take a listen to it?
Yeah, let's take a listen. Better at Leaving.
All right, here we go.
Up in the air, take it or leave it. I keep telling my friends she's just in for the weekend. Come Monday morning, she'll be halfway to Cleveland. She's good at love, but she's better at leaving. She comes in on the Greyhound like Original Sin. Watercolor tattoos splashed on her skin. I don't ask when she's going, I don't ask her to stay. Just keep it in the moment, that's the deal we made. Up in the air, take it or leave it. I keep telling my friends she's just in for the weekend. Come Monday morning, she'll be halfway to Cleveland. She's good at love, but she's better at leaving. She's good at love, but she's better at leaving. The world stops spinning when she touches my hand. No promises are given, no starry-eyed plans. I was lost in a daydream, she stepped out the door. We don't bother saying goodbye anymore. Someday she'll stop and pick it up. It's like holding a match and let it burn to your fingers. Sometimes enough just ain't enough. Up in the air, take it or leave it. I keep telling my friends she's just in for the weekend. Come Monday morning, she'll be halfway to Cleveland. She's good at love, but she's better at leaving. She's good at love, but she's better at leaving. She's good at love, but she's better at leaving.
Awesome song.
Great song.
Do you have the urge to play sax on this?
No,
No.
good.
Sounds like you could have taken a sax quite well, actually.
Well, it's funny. On the last album, we had some horns, and I don't know why, but this album just felt like I wanted some strings on it. And sometimes I think it's just as easy as like this self-indulgent thing. Like I had an itch to scratch, and I'm gonna do that. So yeah. So we actually had those strings played by. We were going to record them locally, and then we recorded this. Well, actually, just about a year ago, we were in Nashville. So COVID was just starting to happen. When we got on the plane to go down, we kind of realized like, I think this is going to be a thing. And while we were down there, things ramped up, and then we got back just before things really shut down. So we had someone flying the string tracks. His name's Matt Combs. He works out in Nashville, and he's just absolutely brilliant. And anyone who's looking for strings, he is the man.
Does he have actual string players playing it, or the?
That's all him.
Or? Oh wow, nice.
He doesn't even write charts. He just does it all by ear and overdubs them on the fly. He's worked with a lot of really like well-established artists, but very gracious, very like quick turnaround. Was just awesome.
Nice.
It's a wonderful track, especially in light of what you'd said. It doesn't sound like a Frankenstein piece at all. That sounds very of a whole. Oh,
good.
And it's got a lovely feel. It kind of made me think of like a Van Morrison song or something. It has a wonderful, easy groove to it. It sounds like a song you thought you probably heard before. Like it's got a great sense of familiarity along with the originality to it. It's really nice.
Good. I'm really happy with how it turned out. I had just this idea in mind, but when Lisa and I play, we're just a duo, and so when we add the full band, there's always some room for experimentation there, and that was actually the second attempt at it. We did one take, and it was cool, and it had this cool kind of riffy bass line that he was playing through through an old Fender amp. So it was kind of this like thin, like splashy bass sound with like a bunch of spring reverb. And it was very cool, but it just wasn't quite what I had in mind. And so I was up kind of all night thinking about it. And actually, so I was up really late, and I had finally fallen asleep. And then I woke up to my phone. I was getting texts from my mom, and she said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm fine." And what I hadn't realized was that was the night that the tornado hit Nashville.
Oh.
And that's how tornadoes are. Like, you can be in one part of town and be 100% fine and not even realize and sleep through it, apparently.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was all kind of going on at that same time. And then when we went back into the studio the next day, I just said, I just said to the bass player, can we try like more of like a Pinot Palladino thing? And he was like, yeah. And then he just did that. That was the first take. And the guitar player hopped in and played this riff. And I was like, that's awesome. Can you double that so we can hard pan it? He's like, yeah. So it pays to be I always try to be the worst musician in the room.
Right. It's always a good place to be. Yeah. Because when you said before,
I always have that.
when you said before we played it that you wrote the song on bass, and then because I really loved the hook, obviously, right? The chorus, and then one of the verses even ends with that descending bass line thing, and I'm like, oh yeah, he did write this on bass, because only bass players would be ding ding ding.
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah. And my favorite part of that arrangement is so the person who played bass, his name is John Estes, and he's also engineered, and I actually mixed it and mastered it back here at home, but John is a multi-instrumentalist, amazing engineer and mix engineer, and really just a phenomenal musician. And he had this idea. There was supposed to be one more chorus in there, and if you notice, before the bridge, it actually goes verse, guitar solo, bridge.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And that's my favorite. He was like, I don't know why, but I feel like we should ditch the chorus there and just have like a really simple guitar solo. And that to me is where the tune really kind of settles in. And anyway, just one of those things that I don't know, I can't put my finger on why it works, but it was the right call at that moment.
It's such an interesting structure where you start off with a chorus.
Yes.
You have chorus, verse, bridge, and then chorus end. But you actually start off with a chorus, which I think is pretty cool.
But it doesn't sound like a chorus right off the bat. It sounds like a verse refrain structure.
Mm.
And then then after the first verse, for the first time I heard it, it's like, oh, he's singing. Why is he singing the first verse again with the refrain? No, that is the chorus. So it's a little bit fuzzy, that line between verse and chorus in that sense.
Yeah, and it is those same changes in both. It wouldn't quite qualify for your song contest. I think I blow it at the bridge. But,
totally.
And the walk down, but
the walk down is really cool, because the verse after the guitar solo, I think you end the verse with that same walk down.
Yes,
right. So so that verse makes it sound like it's a chorus almost.
Right,
and it gives the same feel as the chorus. So it's really fascinating the way you switch it up and play around with that formula.
And it's funny. I'm really glad you picked up on that, because those were all really, I don't want to say calculated, but very specific things that we did for specific reasons.
Yes.
That we like really sat down and chatted about, made it a little hard to remember what was going on in the track because it wasn't as typical a pattern. But I mean, those guys are such pros, and
well, it's calculated, but it's also just, you're going along with that groove, and to be like, okay, we haven't heard this hook in a while because of that bridge. Maybe we should just throw it at the end of the verse instead, because you just need to hear it again because it's so catchy. You know?
Yeah, I think it's allowing yourself to be intuitive about those things.
Yeah.
And I grew up on the Beatles and the Beach Boys, and when you really look at some of their songs, you get the occasional, odd bar, like ending, it's a bar of 3 at the end of the verse, or there's some, I forget which song it is. It's like 7-bar phrases.
Yeah.
And there's no reason that works theoretically, other than it sounds great.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, and they were just not overthinking it, and that was the right move in that isolated context. And so I think we're always trying to be open to those moments. plus we get bonus nerd points for odd time signatures, but it's got to happen in a way that, that works, obviously.
Yeah. And then that feels natural, right? Because I think as you grow as a songwriter, I find myself saying this more and more often than I used to before. It just felt right.
Yeah.
Whatever decision I made, I didn't think about it too much. It just felt right. And that's what ended up.
There's nothing wrong with breaking formula, but it should never sound like you're breaking the formula.
That's what I mean. Yeah.
It should just sound, there is music that is like, we are breaking the formula. It is, that's kind of the whole point of it.
Sure.
But I think for traditional commercial songwriting, I think, you can do lots of interesting things structurally and with arrangements, but it should never pull attention to itself, because then I think you kind of ruin it. It should just be like, what a great song, and then you listen to it and go, what the heck is this time signature? Like Salisbury Hill, which, most people don't realize it's in a really wacky time signature,
Yeah, because it ends up taking the listener out of the song, and that's what you don't want to do as a songwriter, is to push the listener out of the song.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think we've got a few things that pop up like that here and there, and it's honestly most of the time, because we're not writing lead sheets ahead of time. We're writing them going into the studio, but it's often like sitting down to write the chart and being like, oh, it's a bar 3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very cool. So how are you guys dealing with performing over the last year or so? Are you guys doing virtual performances, or what's the deal?
Not really. We did a couple early on. But as we talked about earlier, Lisa, she does all this multitasking with percussion. Mm-hmm. And it's really awesome. It does not translate well to streaming, because she'll play the washboard quite a bit, and that thing just has a way of insisting upon itself sonically that like it really, like, we tried to work it out and it became such a stress, and then we pair things back. We're like, well, this isn't really what we do, because the arrangements and the percussion are part of the songs. Yeah. And then we just thought, we're just going to wait. We're just going to wait and see what happens. And we're trying not to get dragged into the, like, maybe we can do this and maybe we can do that. And maybe this is going to be what happens next year. And maybe it's going to be this. And we're just kind of going to wait and see. So
it's no easier out east. There's not live venues, or there's no performance availability there either?
I think in the next little while, we'll start to see limited capacity performances become available.
Or outdoor if the weather improves.
Yes, as outdoor becomes an option.
That'll help.
We always do a big Christmas show at home every year in the theater here. And honestly, that's kind of the next thing that's officially on the calendar for us. Things are still up in the air, but like that's what we're hoping, is that Christmas shows will happen. Seems wild.
Someday soon, let's hope.
Yeah.
But I do hear the band coming in, so I'm afraid that is all the time we have on SongTalk Radio tonight. Special thanks to John from Tomato. And where can our listeners find more about you guys?
It's tomatotomato.ca. And
one word?
Or, all the socials. Yeah, easy to find.
Tomato. Okay, and we want to hear from you, dear listeners, so please send us your comments on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram at SongTalk Radio, or send us an email at feedback@songtalk.ca. Also, be sure to check out our YouTube channel for live performance videos and full episodes. Now that we're all these little virtual boxes, looks great on YouTube. Subscribe today to the SongTalk Radio podcast on your favorite podcast provider, and don't forget to sign up for our free newsletter at songtalk.ca. You can find links to all the products, books, and web services we mentioned on SongTalk Radio on our resources page at songtalk.ca. And wherever you are in the world, please join us online via Zoom at our next monthly SongTalk meetup. It's free to join on meetup.com and free to attend the meetup. Stop by songtalk.ca for the next meetup. Thanks for listening, everybody, and be sure to stop by the website, songtalk.ca, to browse past shows and find out how you can be a guest. Stay safe, everyone, and keep on writing.
But Neil, how do people get in touch with you?
Oh, how did I miss that? You can get in touch with me at neilmodi.com. How about you, Phil?
You can get in touch with me at thephilemery.ca.
And how about Mike?
Just come to my front door. That's empty.
Okay, we'll publish your address on the next web post.
Oh, that'd be perfect. Yeah.
Mike will give you food.
And John, what's Tomato's best social media channel? What's your go-to?
You know what? I'm not even on social media. I've never seen any of our pages. I don't even know.
You're so cool. You're above it.
Send a postcard.
There you go. I'll get back to you in 6 to 8 weeks.
Right. Perfect. Or just swing by New Brunswick when you're allowed to.
Yeah.
Coffee's on.
Okay, great.
All right.
That's
Nice
all
cup
done.
of tea.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good
Stay
night.
safe.
And we're out.
Cutscene. Great stuff, John.
Oh,
Thank
Yeah.
you very
thanks
much.
for having me, guys.
Really interesting stuff, too.
Oh, good. Thank you. Yeah.
And it's
That was really
nice to
fun. I
have
actually had already-
someone-
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say it's nice to have someone who can talk about their process and be quite articulate about the music they make. It's really good and helpful and entertaining.
Thank you.
No, I was really excited when the email came through to do this. I actually followed the podcast already. So,
Oh, you are.
Nice.
Killer, yeah.
Cool.
I told you, I'm nerdy. I seek these things out.
Right on.
We always figured that if we did our job right, there'd be lots of people who listen to the podcast who weren't songwriters and go, why would you want to listen to that?
That's how I feel about sports shows. What are you going to do?
Yeah, you know?
Exactly.
You know, it's funny when we we have a daughter, and she obviously grows up with us and knows nothing about sports because we're completely detached. And when she was going into kindergarten, she was asking about school and saying like, well, what am I going to do? You know, what do I do in school? And we're like, well, you'll have recess and you'll learn about English and blah, blah, blah. And you'll have gym. And she's like, well, what's gym? And now, mind you, this is a child that could recognize the oboe by ear.
Right.
She's like, gym. And we're like, well, you would play different sports. And she's like, okay, I just have one question. What are sports?
Brilliant.
Anyway, now she's a gymnast.
That's
That's
I
what
was
she
going to
is
say.
today.
I'll be,
Excellent.
is she a musician too, though?
She is, yeah. She's been playing some ukulele. She took piano for a while, of course. And she actually sings with us at our Christmas show.
Nice.
Like,
Oh, that's great.
her first time on stage was at the theater here. So there's like 800 plus people there. And she came out and sang a song. And on one side of her was Dave Gunning. And on the other side was Heather Rankin.
Wow.
She got up and sang this song. They were like part of our tour. And anyway, that was her first time on stage. And she came off just like vibrating. And we realized like we just wrecked our child. Like she will never have a regular job.
Monster.
Yeah. Anyway, but
Right.
yeah.
I realized that in high school that you don't have to choose one or the other. Like I was in a rock band in high school, and our bass player was also the captain of the rugby team. I'm like, why not? You know?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Like Rush used to schedule their tours around the Blue Jays schedule.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Well,
Yeah, I
thanks very
telling
much.
her- yeah.
Yeah, it was a pleasure to chat with you
Definitely
guys.
To have you back.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Please.
bring Lisa on next time. We'll have a chat about band stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, she probably would have a lot to say about contributing to the arrangements and living with me through my process.
It's always
Because there's definitely an emotional arc to the whole
yeah.
thing.
you get an outside objective perspective on the whole thing.
'cause
Objective
there's
might be a
also-
stretch, but yeah.
There's lots of people who are singers, but they're not necessarily writers, and I think that they would be really interested to see what it's like for a singer to work with someone who's a writer, and just being the singer, because it is a different process, you know.
Yeah. Well, it was a few weeks ago we had Kathy Valentine from the Go-Go's on the show, and since we had that show, I started looking more into the Go-Go's. I remember them from when I was a kid, but I didn't really know a lot about them. And Belinda Carlisle, who was the lead singer, who had an amazing solo career in the '80s, she did not write one single note of any of those songs. All the songs were written by the guitarist, the bassist, the drummer, everybody else. Belinda Carlisle did not write anything. Great singer, didn't write any songs.
I didn't realize that. That's interesting.
Just like Frank Sinatra and Elvis and
All of
that
the
was
jazz
a different time, though. Yeah.
singers.
Yeah, all those jazz singers.
Yeah.
Rod Stewart.
Yeah, Rod Stewart never wrote anything, eh?
None?
I don't believe so. I could be wrong, but I don't believe so.
I was
mean, I
surprised that Sam Cooke did write all his songs.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's
he's an
interesting.
amazing songwriter too, and he had his own record label. Like he was really sort of as a businessman or taking control of his business way ahead of the time. So it was a real shame that he died young, because I think he would have just been a major force in music, like Berry Gordy or something. You know,
Yeah. Interesting.
died very young.
I didn't know that. I would have just kind of assumed that he was working as some kind of hit, with some kind of hit factory.
Yeah. No, all his hits he wrote.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Amazing.
And he's like I'd heard like You Send Me and Cupid and a few, but then I started, and there's a great there's two live albums that are great to compare. One's live at the Copa, where he's Mr. Smiley, kind of schmaltz slaha, and then around from the same time as him playing Harlem, I think the Apollo Club or some club in Harlem, and it's so kind of rock and roll, and you can tell he's connecting to the audience, and you kind of go, oh, so all Rod Stewart did was just what Sam Cooke did, but not quite as well. Like it's so much of his phrasing and so much of what Rod Stewart does is Sam Cooke, and there's just so much more to him. I've just been listening to him a lot more lately.
It's so cool how there's so many icons out there who you take for granted. Of course, Sam Cooke, he's amazing. But then you have that moment where you kind of get to dig in a little. I had that with Little Richard 6 months ago, where I've always known who Little Richard was and knew he was influential, but I really got into him. And Lisa was fine, like, enough, I know, Little Richard is great. Like, can we move
No more
on?
Little Richard facts.
Well, and especially when you realize, like, the time when he was he came out, it was just like the parents must have just been going like, "What the hell's going on?" It's just like he was so insane, and it was like having the Sex Pistols on stage, like in the 50s. It was loud and screaming, and
Right.
And no lyrics. Like the parents must have been going, what is this song about?
Yeah.
What is this tutti frutti?
Yeah, exactly.
That's a lyric.
what is your tutti frutti?
Yeah, but when you listen to live recordings of him, like, oh my God,
Unbelievable.
just the energy.
Yeah.
Oh,
Unbelievable.
yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
So did Little Richard write anything, or was he singing other people's songs?
I think he wrote most of
He's a
it.
writer. Yeah.
Yeah, I assumed that.
We can do a quick
I mean,
search.
I assumed he was writing some of those. I mean, there's not a lot to some of them.
Yeah, I mean they're blues.
Yeah, they're piano grooves mostly.
Piano groove
right?
blues songs, but I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah, he wrote a lot of the songs.
Okay.
But I wonder about. He did write Bamalama Bamaloo, so there is that.
Man, when I was writing this album, I was going through old, early Beatles stuff, which I haven't listened to as much as
I love the early.
some later stuff. I was looking at Love, Love Me Do, and it's like there's like nothing here. It's so great, and there's so little lyrical content. It's like, why am I working so hard?
It's true. It's amazing. And
That
there's
is the
very
truth.
little instrumentation too. It's so simple.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and just Little Richard did co-write Lucille and Tutti Frutti and Long Tall Sally, and so he had a hand in all that, all
Okay,
of his hits.
cool. Probably
Very
studio.
Damn, the internet is useful. But I would highly recommend checking out this live Sam Cooke. You can listen to it on Spotify. The Copa is good, as much for, like, the band is fantastic, but also just to get a sense of how he handles a really stiff white crowd.
Right.
But then the Harlem one is, the sound quality is not quite as good, but the energy is amazing. And his voice is, like, he's got to be one of the top 5 rock singers, like, or pop music singers. It's unbelievable how good his vocals are.
Yeah.
Awesome stuff.
Yeah. Absolutely.
That's my tip of the week.
I'll do it. I'm on
All
it.
right.
All right.
As a Beatles fan, have you heard the latest Paul McCartney record?
All I've heard about it so far is that it's highly compressed. That's what
Oh, really?
I'm also
Really?
a
I never
mastering
noticed that.
I'm also a mastering engineer, so that's
Right.
that's why this room looks the way it does. So that's all the talk right now on the mastering blogs is that, have you heard the new Paul McCartney? It's
Squashed to death.
throwing out numbers like it's like minus 8.5 lufs. Like it's anyway. I'll have to check out.
I ain't that nerdy, but but in terms of songwriting and his voice and the lyrical content, it's really interesting. It's like very experimental in places.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That makes sense. I
check
mean,
that out.
yeah, that makes sense.
And he plays everything. It's just his locked away, coming up with music by himself. There is one song that goes on for a bit, and you can kind of imagine, him stoned in his studio, it's going on. It only stops because his wife is like, Paul, supper.
Or breakfast.
or breakfast.
Yeah. Oh, very cool. I'll have to check that out.
Yeah. Maybe you can be on the
Thanks
show
again
someday.
for being on the show, John.
Yeah,
It was
great.
great.
Oh, really? Anytime. I'd love to come back.
Yeah.
All right.
Excellent. We'd love to have you. So
All right.
Awesome.
You guys stay safe.
our
and,
people will talk to your people, and
Well said, something.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
we
All
are
right, guys.
our people. All right. Good night.
Yeah. All right.
There's
Peace.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Right.
Very good.
Right. That was
Good
great.
stuff.
That was good.
All right. I will
All right,
put this
so-
on the.
Yeah, and as
I'm
doing
recording
the,
it too, so I think I'll get it when we exit.
Okay, let me know when it's up, and I'll try to remember all the things we talked about to put on this, like definitely that Pitchfork article,
Yeah.
and
Matt Coombs, or Combs too. We should mention him.
Matt Coombs.
The guy did the strings.
Oh yeah,
Oh.
and well, that whole he should give a shout out to a couple of people too, but okay, I'll see if he.
We can just get an email, ask him, and
Yeah.
for him to send us the links. I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm sure the guy has a website or whatever.
Matt. Oh, it's Combs. So he's the staff fiddler and mandolinist for the Grand Ole Opry.
Cool.
And so he does the intro when the Grand Ole Opry fiddle, like it starts with a fiddle piece. That's him.
Right on.
That is so cool.
And he tours with Reba McEntire.
All right.
And he is and he has been nominated for a Grammy and won the 2012 Grandmaster Traditional Fiddle Contest. Well, there you go.
There you go.
Oh, and
He-
he's
he
head
ain't
of the
fiddling
fiddle
around.
department at Vanderbilt. Sorry.
Said he ain't fiddling around. Serious.
No.
Dad
no,
joke.
he's not. All right. Yeah, he must be. And he doesn't look like that old of a fella.
Wow.
All right.
All right. Then.
All right, guys.
All right.
show.
Well, that's great. We'll talk on Thursday.
Always
Talk on
down.
Thursday.
Have a good week. Until then.
Okay.
Cheers.
Take care, everyone. Bye.